I think it might be really inspiring for future filmmakers to understand how you managed to transition into filmmaking because it's a unique story and you've brought so many great films to us and it's just impressive to hear that you figured it out on your own entirely. What was that story?
Yeah, I was living in Canada, in Vancouver, and I was working. I think at the time I was working for like ad agencies, and then eventually I started working for a snowboard and skateboard apparel company in Vancouver. So I was hanging out in Whistler and snowboarding and stuff. And 9/11 happened, and my family is originally from Lebanon. My grandparents came from Lebanon, all four of them, and my parents and my family were, from a northern small town in northern Alberta. And my parents started to get phone calls telling them to go back to where they came from, and it just became very apparent to me that, this sort of my Arab identity, my Arab background, which was like sort of just, up until that point, like I say, we played a lot of hockey and ate a lot of hummus. Like it really was not something I had really thought about. And after 9/11, it sort of took me on this a bit of a journey. I went back to Lebanon and worked with Palestinian refugees there, and then came back and ended up sort of getting involved with a group that did sort of a film school with Palestinian, Israeli, and Canadian youth, and just that being involved in that project sort of inspired me to go to Palestine. And I ended up getting a job with a Palestinian organization that did sort of, I was like helping them with some marketing. I went to stay for 6 months, and I ended up staying for 7 years. And while I was there, I came across, I was doing like sort of small films. Like I had a cousin of mine that worked for UNRWA, and I would go out and do some photography for them and stuff. And one of the women that drove me around the West Bank was a race car driver. And it was sort of how I got into this world of Palestinian women race car drivers. And myself and a friend of mine literally just picked up a camera and started to document these girls without really knowing what we were doing. And then we were able to make, after 5 years, we were able to make a film called Speed Sisters. And that sort of, yeah, it set me off on my career. I moved to the US, and then ended up being a cinematographer on a lot of projects, and then had edited or directed a couple of small projects myself, and then Coexistence. But I think for me, it was really important to tell stories from the Middle East that were nuanced, but also surprising. Like I feel like um, the way that Islamophobia works, and the way that sort of anti-Arab sentiment has grown since, 9/11. We see it today, how easily, Arabs are demonized. And yeah, and it was just really important for me to try to make films and humanizing is like not really the right word, but it's to show that there's more depth. We're painted as such a particular character, and that it's a really important. I feel like we see stories that come from, an entirely different sort of world than what we expect. Yeah, that's how I sort of got into it. But also very Canadian. Would love to do a hockey film, so.
Really interesting. Wait a second. Are you talking about some
Yeah, yeah, Canadian rivalry.
rivalry? What?
No, but I mean, yeah, it's, obviously the Middle East is something that's very dear to me, but it's, I'm also excited to be going back to Canada, and maybe looking at some things in Canada as well.
Your prime minister in Canada just made a very important speech that everyone is sharing in full these days because it's one of the only sane speeches we've heard on the world stage about international relations in a long time. So that decision sounds quite wise. I get it. Thank you for sharing. This was really, really inspiring and meaningful. And I look forward to putting this out, letting everyone hear you.
Awesome.
Thanks again,
Yeah.
Amber.
Thanks so much, Vanessa.
Yep.